What's up, everybody? Welcome into the latest The Blitz Network Radio. With you here, as always, your host and editor-in-chief, Robert Zaglinski. And today, we are going to dive right into Bears and Eagles on Sunday. We're going to preview the whole matchup, get into all the storylines, NFC wildcard game, Bears' first postseason experience since 2010. Obviously, you've heard that by this point. And I'm pleased to get into this preview with Benjamin Solak of Bleeding Green Nation. You can follow him on Twitter at Benjamin Solak. I'm pretty sure many of you have already run across him. Does some great work over there. Also writes for the Draft Network. Ben, how are you, buddy?
Oh man, every day is a good day to be alive, Robert. Thanks for asking. I'm excited, man. I'm it's the first Eagles game I go to all year because I actually live in Chicago, so I got very lucky with the playoff draw.
How much did you pay for those tickets?
Zero, but your boy's in the press box. Come on now.
Oh, okay. Wow. All right.
I had to stunt on him a little bit, but yeah, I'm excited. It's gonna be a ton of fun.
Humble brag there. All right, let's jump right into it. There are a lot of storylines at this point, Ben. Did you know, first of all, that Kyle Long and Chris Long are brothers and that their dad is Howie Long and they're playing this game? Wow, did you know that?
Wow, crazy. I was disappointed that the game wasn't on Fox because then Howie would have been involved pregame, but it's NBC. So they got 2 out of the 3.
Did you also know that Alshon Jeffrey used to play for the Bears and that Trey Burton threw a touchdown for the Eagles?
Alshon used to work for the Bears.
He used to work for the Bears. Yeah, he used to work for the Bears. Mm-hmm. So those those non-obvious storylines aside, what sticks out to you as far as a narrative behind this game? Maybe something that's not as obvious, not being so facetious anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I'm super interested to watch the Bears in general as a playoff team because we've had a full season of how much does defense really matter? Like that's been like a huge narrative, and it's been, you know, the massive offensive explosion. So many records were set in 2018, et cetera, et cetera. Bears defense is the best defense in terms of against scoring and against passing. And so if there's going to be a defense that can win a championship in the modern age of football, it's going to be this Bears defense, at least for this year, you know? And so I'll be very interested to see if the Bears defense can really carry them. So I'll tell you right now, when I watch Mitchell Trubisky, a player who's going to be stepping into his first playoff start in his second year, I don't really see a quarterback who threatens me a great deal. And when you step into the playoffs, the 3 things that you really circle in terms of on-field impact is quarterback, offensive line, and defensive line. And I think that the Bears are pretty wanting for quarterback as compared to the rest of the NFC field. And then offensive line, they've got a solid offensive line. It's not stellar, but it's solid. And then obviously defensive line is going to be the strength among those 3. So if defense can carry a team, then it's going to be the Bears. And so I'll be very interested to see. I think the first playoff start for Trubisky is going to be shaky no matter what. And then if they win, well, you're heading on the road, Los Angeles. That's going to be a tough environment to play in. And so I'm interested to see if this Bears defense can really get Trubisky through the bumps and the bruises that come with being a first-time playoff starter.
So your questions with Trubisky are more that he's just inexperienced on these kinds of stages, really?
Yeah, well, what I think you see from Trubisky when you watch him play, which I went through a few games of the Bears in preparation, is that Trubisky's it's not necessarily a weakness, but he's just not super trusted right now in terms of he's not making the same number of faith throws, tight window throws against man coverage that you see from a lot of playoff caliber quarterbacks. He's not making the same sort of downfield full progression reads. The ball's out of his hand very quickly. He's taking advantage of space and of quick screens and throws behind the line of scrimmage and throws within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. It's a lot of stuff that gets the work out of your quarterback's hands. That's not a problem. It's exactly what Philadelphia does with Nick Foles. You know what I mean? Like this isn't an issue. It's just simply to say that I don't view Trubisky as I might view a Russell Wilson, a guy who, even though the Seahawks are deficient in some areas, even though they're a 5th seed, I always have that thought in the back of my head, you know, Wilson could just pop off and it's a ball game no matter who they're playing. I don't see that capability in Trubisky. And that's something that, you know, when you're winning 3, potentially 4 games to win a Super Bowl in the playoffs, well, you really need a quarterback who I think can play at that caliber. It's very tough it's very tough to get to a championship game, to get to the Super Bowl without having a quarterback of that caliber. You know, like Joe Flacco, I always go back to. We know Flacco's not really that caliber of quarterback, but the best stretch of football he ever played was that playoff run. And it was, he popped off of that playoff run and got the Ravens a Super Bowl championship. And since then, we've viewed Flacco as an overpaid and kind of overrated quarterback.
Yeah.
And so you need to have that ability to string together 3-4 elite games. I'm not sure I see that yet in a second-year player like Trubisky.
I do wonder about how much defense does matter, but I guess my thought process behind that is we kind of saw, at least down the stretch of the five or six last games of the season or so, that offensive explosion started to slow down. For me, if anything, and I'm not that confident in the Bears. I don't think this is a team that's going to win the Super Bowl, but I think the defense will be enough for a game or two at this rate. I think that's a successful jump for this team at this point. One or two postseason wins, and then growing experience. And then Trubisky morphing into that kind of quarterback you're talking about, ideally for this franchise next year.
Yeah, a playoff win for a first-year head coach and a second-year quarterback and a third or second-year general manager, right?
Mm-hmm. No, fifth year or fourth year general manager.
Hey, he's been on for 4 years. Jeez, I'm old. No, absolutely. For a young nucleus like that, a playoff win, even if it's against the backup quarterback 60, whatever. A playoff win is a playoff win. It's huge for your resume. It gives you so much confidence moving into next year. And really, what I think is most impressive about this Bears team, and honestly, I think the reason to me, I view Coach of the Year as a two-horse race right now. To me, it should be between Matt Nagy and then Anthony Lynn of the Chargers. I don't think Pete Carroll should be up there. I've heard Pete Carroll. I think that Pete Carroll's team is winning a little bit in spite of some of the coordinator decisions he's made. But to me, it's Lynn and Nagy. And the reason I think I would lean Nagy is because it's one thing to bring in the amount of personnel to make the amount of acquisitions that Ryan Pace did. It's another thing for a first-year coach and work with a good defensive coordinator in Vic and a good offensive coordinator in Helfrich to integrate all those pieces as successfully as he has, right? This Bears team looks like it's been playing together for 3 years. Like 50% of the pieces have been acquired in the last 2 seasons, last season. You know what I mean? It's wild.
20 new players from 2017 to 2018.
Exactly. That's a great stat. I'm going to use that. I'm not going to cite you. That's bananas, and it speaks to Nagy's ability as a first-year head coach to really manage a roster, in my opinion. So that's what I think has been the biggest strength of this team. You can only wonder what another year will look like of chemistry between Trubisky and his new wideouts. If Vic Fangio is able to be retained, which obviously is a huge wild card, what they'll be able to continue doing on the defensive side, et cetera, et cetera. So young team, made it to the playoffs, won the NFC North, which, they were second, third team potentially to win that division when it came into the season. So it's a big W for them. Win a playoff game as well. Yeah, the Bears are going to be the team that has the arrow most pointing up when we look at the 2019 season for sure.
Let's get to the Eagles, Ben. How on earth did they turn their season around from I believe 48-7 blowout against the Saints all the way back in November? How did you can give me the short version, you can give me the long version. Obviously it's been a whirlwind since then.
Yeah, the 2 things changed. Big 3 things if you count Nick Foles coming in. But really, we always talk about Philadelphia played a tight game against a Dallas team for the division week 14. It was a game where Philadelphia took 3 quarters to get awake on offense. It was a game where Carson Wentz really seemed to struggle and be jumpy. And it was a game where there was some poor officiating that affected a lot of things. But if Philadelphia wins that game, we're not talking about a Nick Foles 3-game win streak to make the playoffs. We're talking about a Carson Wentz 3-game win streak against 3 divisional opponents to take the lead in the division. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So the Nick Foles aspect of the narrative actually gets a little bit inflated. The Eagles are 5 out of 6 in the last 6 games, and 2 of those wins were with Carson Wentz. Now, the Foles change is 1, and the Foles change changes the complexion of the offense. The Eagles attempt a lot of shorter, quicker throws. They attempt a lot more basic underneath concepts, curl flat, slant flat, double slants, whatever, and they just let Foles kind of facilitate. He's a point guard out there. But the big change on offense has been the usage of 12 personnel. Philadelphia traded for Golden Tate at the deadline. Week 9, the Eagles had their bye. Week 10, week 11, they were integrating Tate into the offense. We saw a huge swell in 11 personnel, 3 wide receiver sets with Tate on the field, and a big drop off from 12 personnel, 2 tight end sets, which would have used Zach Ertz, who obviously is having an all-pro season, and then Dallas Goedert, the second-round pick that Philadelphia had out of South Dakota State. Those weeks were the worst offensive weeks for the Eagles, where they were just force-feeding the ball to Golden Tate, force-feeding the ball into 11 personnel. Defenses are built to stop 11 personnel. As a matter of fact, the Bears have faced the least amount of 12 personnel this season out of any team on defense. After that kind of week 12, week 13 point, 12 personnel has been steadily climbing and 11 personnel has kind of bottomed out. In 3 of the past 4 weeks, 12 personnel significantly outsnapped 11 personnel. Philadelphia is using 2 tight end sets to create fantastic mismatches because they force you to keep your base personnel on the field. You're worried about the run, but Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz are both plus receiving options, and when they get matched up over linebackers, it's a win for the offense. The final change has been the secondary, again, weeks like 10, 11. We're touting out guys they signed 3 weeks ago, right? I mean, like, Cre'Von LeBlanc has stuck.
His revenge game is coming.
Yeah, exactly. The revenge of LeBlanc. But Devontae Bosby was a guy who was in camp for the 53-man roster, or for the 90-man roster, failed to make the 53-man roster. They had to start him against Amari Cooper and the Cowboys. Chandon Sullivan was an undrafted free agent who was in the 90-man camp, was practice squad. Had to be elevated, had to be started the following week. Philadelphia is still not healthy in the secondary. 3 of their week 1 starters, Ronald Darby, Jalen Mills, and Rodney McLeod, are all down, but they're getting good play from a second-year corner in Rasul Douglas, good play from a rookie corner, Avonte Maddox. Cre'Von LeBlanc is passable in the nickel, and then Malcolm Jenkins remains a stud playing 10,000 different positions. So the safeties the secondary has started to level out, and that makes it a little bit easier to coordinate the defense. You don't have to play a simple style of stuff because you're not rotating bodies anymore. Those have been the 3 big changes. And hey, the belief in Nick Foles makes this team very dangerous because they always think they can win these stupid games they never should. And that confidence alone has a huge impact.
The legend, I guess, behind Nick Foles is so fascinating to me. I don't want to characterize it as, just from an outsider's perspective looking in, I don't want to characterize it as, oh, hey, the Eagles like Nick Foles more, the Eagles believe in Nick Foles more than Carson Wentz. But that facet of how much they rally behind him, I think I saw a few weeks ago there was Fletcher Cox having a shrine to him. Was that Fletcher Cox?
Yeah, Chris Long had the shrine. Fletcher Cox was lighting the candles in the shrine, which is never a sentence I thought I would say, but here we are.
Yeah, so they had that's just an example of it. Why do they believe in him so much? I mean, I know he's the guy that led them to a Super Bowl, but he's a high-level backup at his core. I mean, we like you said at the top of the show, he's not a guy that's necessarily making all of these crazy throws the way a real franchise quarterback would.
Yeah, so very simply, if we were to trace it all the way back, the reason the Philadelphia Eagles believe in Nick Foles is because with less than 2 minutes left in the divisional round of the 2017-2018 playoffs against the Atlanta Falcons, Keanu Neal kneed a football in the middle of the air that he should have intercepted. It bounced off his knee, and it landed in the lap of Torrey Smith, and Philadelphia was able to steal a field goal out of that drive on a day where they had been awful. And they went to the locker room 10-9. And then they would come out and allow 0 points to the Atlanta Falcons on defense and only pick up another 6 points on offense. Win an ugly, bad game they never should have won, 15-10. And then Lane Johnson dog masks, and Philadelphia went bananas, right? Philadelphia just went AWOL. They went insane. And then they only gave up 7 points again at home to the Minnesota Vikings in the ensuing conference championship game, right? Like, what's crazy is Philadelphia's home defense splits are already ridiculous. Like, their defense does not travel super well, which is good news for Chicago. But when Nick Foles is the starting quarterback, this is the best defense in the league at home. They allow nothing. They button up so tight when they understand that Foles is the opposite quarterback. And so once Philadelphia won that Atlanta game, they won one game as the underdogs, the disrespected first seed, and Chris Long and Lane Johnson masked up. At that point, there was too much of a legend, right? There was too much of a belief. Like, the Eagles should have never beaten the Vikings 38-7. But once there was the little Patrick Peterson pick six and the crowd started going, I mean, it was a snowball down a mountain. It was an avalanche. You couldn't stop it. And then you get to the playoffs, and it's the Patriots, the villain of the NFL, and it's Nick Foles and the unbelievable storyline and 2 whole weeks of feeding into it. And Philadelphia traveled insanely well for that game. Their fans traveled great. Once you establish that legend, which again started with just Keanu Neal dropping the easiest interception in the world. When Foles comes in to play the Rams week 15, well, everybody believes there's a chance the Eagles can win because, hey, you won the freaking Super Bowl, and then they win. And then it's already shoot. Well, if we beat the Texans, we're at a point we can make the playoffs. So they beat the Texans in a game where they were up by 13 and gave up 14 unanswered, and then Nick Foles led a quote-unquote game-winning drive that really was like 1 play, 1 penalty, and a field goal. But whatever. It's the fact of the matter is, because with no other team is it even remotely close that when their backup quarterback comes in, the team just has evidence to the fact that they've won wearing those jerseys with these brothers, with the same teammates before, in the most absurd and lopsided of circumstances. And so Philadelphia is going to walk into Chicago assuming that, believing they are going to win the game. Because why, anecdotally, why would you not? They keep winning with the dude at the helm. And so people rally around them because at this point, the narrative exists. You know what I mean? At this point, there's the magic is believable. And even if they were to lose to Chicago, people are still going to believe that Foles is an unprecedentedly clutch winner, because he kind of is.
How much stock, just as a follow-up to how much stock do you actually put in the Eagles' experience over the Bears? I've seen that as something that's that's been touted a lot this week, and I feel it necessary to point out that the Eagles they had some players with playoff experience, but they were largely in the same spot as the Bears are this year before their playoff run in 2017. So it's interesting to me that's what's pushed upon. I obviously when you finish a Super Bowl run, you have you ratchet up in that experience sense, but it's not that dramatic. And there are some Bears that have been here before that have played on this stage, not all of the core, but Akeem Hicks, Prince Amukamara, Burton, for example. Mm-hmm. How much stock do you put in that experience, Edge?
Probably less than the general narrative, because mm-hmm. it's anecdotal, and it's just generally kind of a storyline. But that being said, you do see a pretty significant struggle for first-time playoff quarterbacks in terms of what we've been talking about with Trubisky earlier. And I think what I saw was that, when you have a first-time playoff quarterback against a veteran playoff quarterback, first-time playoff quarterback is 10 and 28, overall record. It's very, very tough. It's very, very different when it comes to playoff football in terms of, things like the weather and your body's been beat up for 18 weeks, sure, but also just in terms of your mental preparation. So often, players who are in the playoffs for the first time report that, they try to prepare the same way for a playoff game, but they just prepare differently. They changed their schedule. It has a different character to it because they know it's the playoffs. They know it's single elimination, kind of has that character to it. So there is certainly some stock into it from the quarterback perspective. From the team perspective, unless you've got Anthony Miller dropping 3 passes he shouldn't have dropped, or, Eddie Jackson making the wrong reads for whatever reason, your young star players kind of, really just struggling on that stage. You saw Juju Smith-Schuster with the most uncharacteristic fumble in an absolutely huge game against the Saints in Week 16. It can happen, but I put much more stock into it for the quarterbacks and for the decision makers than I do for just the team in general. So I think there's some credence to it. Probably not as much as we put into it. There never is. We always make out narratives to be kind of more powerful than they are, I think.
Absolutely. I guess from that perspective, how in your mind do you think the Eagles ingratiated themselves in well last year? How did they how did they dip their toes into the water?
Yeah, so the thing for Philadelphia was that they had enough, in my opinion, veteran presence that they weren't necessarily a super young team coming into the playoffs. Mm-hmm. Nick Foles had a playoff start before under the Chip Kelly era, which obviously a little bit different. But then you had a significant amount of veteran presence on the team, whether free agent acquisitions like Alshon Jeffrey and Torrey Smith and Chris Long, or the guys that you've had around for a while, like Fletcher Cox, like Jason Kelce, Jason Peters, and Malcolm Jenkins. To me, they had enough of a veteran leadership presence. It was something they talked about last year, how valuable their veterans were. Then I don't think they were super viewed as a team that was very fresh coming into the playoffs. If anything, it was Doug Peterson being a second-year coach and his ability to manage a playoff team. But Doug benefits from, and I think Nagy benefits from this as well, a very aggressive coaching nature to them. And I think that translates really well to the playoffs because it's not too big for you because, you're here to either win or lose of your own volition, of your own effort. You're not going to get scared by the moment. It's impressive that both of them have kind of shucked that off from Andy Reid, who, of course, as an Eagles fan, I know that Andy Reid struggles a bit with playoff coaching, as you once said. But so I think that aggressiveness helps with the young coaches. Philadelphia, as a team last year and this year, I think, is a team that has enough of a veteran presence, enough playoff experience that it wouldn't have impacted them too much.
With Peterson and Nagy, that's a good segue. They don't run entirely the same offensive systems, but they obviously come from the same coaching tree. They base their offense around this similar concepts, around similar core concepts. How do you think that plays into Sunday's matchup, where they both know each other so well? I mean, this isn't going to be like a divisional game by any means, but you do have that familiarity, you do have that comfort with what the other one's going to be doing.
I do think it plays a huge part of it. I'm so interested to see what happens because not only do you have two guys who come from a very similar coaching tree who literally like 3 years ago were bouncing ideas off each other. Like their job was to talk about offense and figure it out. You know what I mean? Like not only do you have that, you have two of the three most established, veteran, trusted defensive coordinators in the league in Jim Schwartz and Vic Fangio. And so not only do you have two very innovative offensive minds, but you have two established defensive minds who've seen this sort of stuff for a while and have been working with offensive coaches who organize it. The Bears and Eagles offense is quite similar in terms of their willingness to take short intermediate space the moment it's afforded to them. They're willing to split the field in half and make half field reads. Their use of formation into the boundary and unbalanced formations is another thing that's very prevalent across the two groups. Those are typically things that really screw with the defense's assignments. But then you wonder, well, Fangio and Schwartz have been under these coaches. They probably have a better idea of the checks that are necessary. It's going to be a wild chess match. I think the biggest question for the Philadelphia defense against the Bears offense is going to be the ability for the corners and the overhangs, the safeties to come up and tackle and to set tough edges. The Bears want to get outside of you. They want to get into the boundary. They run, little 20 personnel and they run their jet sweeps and they run their little bubble screens. You have to be able to force that back into the defense, into your help, into your defensive linemen, your linebackers to make quick tackles. You try to make tackles in space and you miss one, there's a ton of green grass. So that's going to be the big challenge facing the Bears offense. And then what's it going to be for the Bears defense and the Philadelphia offense? Philadelphia offensive line has been playing stellar football for about the past 5 weeks, and Nick Foles has the lowest time to throw in the league. Philadelphia is good at negating really good pass rushers. They expose them in space. They trap them. They wham them. They've done a great job with good edges. So Khalil Mack, how much is he going to affect this game? I think Philadelphia is going to be willing to trap Khalil Mack and to expose him in misdirection, to make him the read key on option plays and to take the edge off his pass rush and then say, listen, if Akeem Hicks and Eddie Goldman can beat us, then they can beat us. But we're not going to let Khalil Mack be the guy who beats us. And so how much pressure will the Bears defensive line be able to establish against an offensive line that's really playing hot coming into the game? So those are the matchups I'm watching there. But the chess match is super interesting for anybody who's watching this game, Bears fan, Eagles fan, or otherwise.
I saw you talking about how the Eagles would try to block Mack, and I find that strategy interesting to where it's characterized as not actually trying to block him. It's more just messing with him. It's getting in his way, and it's confusing him, and it's just continually throwing curveballs at the kind of obviously caliber superstar pass rusher he is. That's what you'd expect from the Eagles on Sunday. They're not really going to try to go head on with him. It's going to be more about playing play more of a chess game where they're not. Is that fair to say?
I mean, yeah, I think so. In terms of the fact that you're going to have, I think what you're going to have is two coaches who acknowledge the fact that for them to have this win on offense, it's going to be who outcoaches, and it's not necessarily going to be in the hands of the quarterback just because of the extent to which they trust Foles and Trubisky. I don't know if that makes sense, but this is going to really be a situation where, when you go to the simple constraint plays for Chicago and the simple constraint plays for Philadelphia, if you're going to be able to find a weakness in the defensive tendencies, one, or two, get your offensive weapons to break that one tackle, to make that one big play, that's going to be a huge impact because you don't want either of these quarterbacks in a play from behind situation where they have to make plays to be successful.
What scares you if you're the Eagles?
The Bears' defensive secondary having so much versatility to it that they can throw a lot of really confusing pre-snap looks at Nick Foles because Nick Foles' best strength is his pre-snap recognition. And so if the Bears' defensive backfield spends a lot of time spinning and trapping and pattern matching, which they love to do, Foles has to do much more work post-snap, which is going to slow down his process, his time to throw, and is going to lead him into poor decisions. Foles' strength is when he can ID what you want to do pre-snap. And Philadelphia's offense is built when Nick Foles is under center to help Foles identify things pre-snap via formation, via motion, so on and so forth. So the Bears' ability to be multiple because they have such good cover guys at safety and they have such good tacklers at corner, so on and so forth. That ability to be multiple is going to make things tricky for Nick Foles post-snap or pre-snap, which is his greatest strength. So I think the Bears match up very nicely in that regard.
Ideally, you have a healthy Eddie Jackson there, obviously dealing with a ankle sprain. We'll see how that plays out. What gives you confidence aside from Trubisky's inexperience and first playoff start? So aside from that, what gives you confidence if you're the Eagles?
Y'all got a left guard, a rookie left guard, James Daniels. So I got a good center. I like Cody Whitehair a lot, but he ain't big. And you got a left tackle, Charles Leno, who I don't think is playing super well. And the left side of y'all's line is the right side of my line, and that's Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham. And they are good. They've been playing pretty well recently. Michael Bennett and Chris Long roll out what's really a fantastic front four. When this Eagles team wins and this Eagles defense is successful, it's because the front four was able to generate very quick pressure. Trubisky is an escape artist. He's got fantastic mobility and he can create on the run, but it's also where he makes the majority of his mistakes. And so Philadelphia, 2 weeks removed from playing Deshaun Watson, they were comfortable letting Watson run out of the pocket on them and pick up yards with his legs, but they limited Watson's ability to throw on the run by getting pressure with 4, dropping 7, and matching the 4 or 5 routes that they saw so as to force Watson to tuck and run. He wasn't able to generate those long plays through the air outside of the pocket. But I think they'll have a very similar approach to Trubisky, and I think you got a guy like Trubisky who might, especially if the Bears are in a close game, if the Bears are down, start trying to push that ball down the field. That's where he makes the majority of his mistakes, when he's pushing, when he's trying to score, when he's on the run. And that's why I think Philadelphia can generate turnovers. The big thing here is the turnover battle. Philadelphia's been one of the worst teams in the turnover battle all year, but they've been better recently. Chicago's team in terms of turnover rate, period, on defense. And so if Philadelphia, if we had the game and the Bears picked up 2 turnovers and Philadelphia got 0, the Eagles won't be able to win this game. They're going to need to generate short fields via turnover. And to do that, you got to get Trubisky out of the pocket and you got to make him make bad decisions.
Ultimately, Ben, what do you think happens on Sunday? Give me your game pick and give me why. So score, whatever.
My take is this. Bears are probably going to win. If the Eagles win, they're going to the Super Bowl. It's just if the Eagles win another playoff game with Nick Foles, a game that they should not win as a 6th seed, I don't see how they lose ever again for the history of the world. Yeah, it's just ridiculous.
Oh, come on, man! You think they're gonna go into New Orleans the next week and then probably Los Angeles? Okay.
What I'm saying is this is the last. If Nick Foles wins this playoff game, then you got a guy who came in, won a playoff game he shouldn't have won a Super Bowl that he shouldn't have won, came back in, won a regular season game that he shouldn't have won to make the playoffs, and then won a playoff game he shouldn't have won again. It's just, at that point, there's just going to be so much steam in the Philadelphia trade that I won't be able to pick against them on any other game. You know what I mean? I don't care what it looks like on paper. It's just, at this point, how do you stand in front of that train and say it's probably going to stop here? That's my point. But I think the Bears win it. I think the Bears defense at home is going to be fantastic. And I think it's going to be enough to hold Philadelphia down. This is probably an ugly, low-scoring game when all things are said and done. I can see the Bears winning this 16-10. I can see them winning it 19-14. If Philadelphia wins it, it's probably still an ugly game that they were able to come out on top, whether it's last possession or because they got a nice turnover or whatever. If this game becomes a shootout, honestly, I think Philadelphia is probably favored in that regard, but I think it's very unlikely. So Bears, I think 19-13 is probably, I think Philadelphia's got a really good red zone defense. So you're probably going to get a lot of field goals on them because they do give up a ton of yardage. 19-13 would be my pick for the Bears. That being said, go Eagles. Hope they win.
Yeah, that's interesting. That final note you have about if it turns into a shootout, the Bears, they haven't won a game this year when they've allowed more than 24 points. So, I mean, Trubisky's actually played well in those games, but when the defense has faltered, they're not. They're not as strong. I mean, obviously, when the strength of the team falters, they haven't been able to overcome that adversity. They haven't been able to overcome those shortcomings previously. So, I'd actually agree with you there. I'd probably favor the Eagles if it did somehow turn into a shootout, but I also think it'll be a low-scoring affair. Ben, I appreciate you taking the time, buddy. I know you're a busy man. I know you're heading out to the press box on Sunday afternoon. So really have fun with that. It'll be a great first experience. Very happy for you, buddy. I appreciate you talking to me here.
No, of course, and good luck to you. Bears are a fun team to root for, so if it has to be them, then I'll be okay with it.
You guys can follow Ben on Twitter at Benjamin Solak. Oh man, tongue-tied here. He's the deputy editor for Bleeding Green Nation at Bleeding Green. He also does draft work for the Draft Network. He's one of the best follows you'll find on Twitter. Rising star.
Hey.
You won't regret it. I'm just saying, man.
I appreciate it. That's very kind.
You gotta note the hard work, and you gotta note the real ones when you can. So follow him there. He's the truth. And as always, everybody, you can follow us on Twitter at the Blitz Night. You can follow me on Twitter at Robert Zaglinski. Until Sunday afternoon, stay classy.